Good evening. Welcome to Daddy's still broadcasting. Hope everyone is having a beautiful weekend. As far as yeah, so all day I've been editing the vlog about the coronavirus scare from last Thursday when I did my innocent, flawless DIYs with Ash. Great to see you, YouTube sister. I saw your live stream a couple days ago, and great job. I'm working. It's a 12-minute vlog. I'm working on the vlog from last Thursday with the coronavirus scare when I did my ordinary, unsuspecting grocery shopping, just like I usually do during the week because I want to beat the weekend crowds. And I ended up getting stuck in the melee, the mayhem of the coronavirus scare. So everyone had everyone ran to the supermarkets to stock up on toilet paper and rubbing alcohol and food items, as it were. In the case that they're going to be quarantined, I think the government is telling people to stock up very lightly just in case they get quarantined. Wow, Ash, that's crazy, Ash. Thank you for your service and your hard work. I was a grocery store cashier and I stocked shelves for a while in a couple different grocery stores when I was putting myself through college. So cheers to you. I certainly hope that you don't get sick, and I hope that everyone is patient and caring and really respects the job that you do, because it's a rough job that you have. You're not just scanning things on a conveyor belt. You are dealing with people, and that is an art. So kudos to you, Ash. Lisa from Canada, great to see you. If I recall correctly, Ontario, Ottawa, Canada. And yeah, so tonight we're gonna stick with the theme. I've been working all day on the vlog, Lisa, from when I went to the supermarket and just the chaos. Believe it or not, surprisingly, people were overall calm. You could see the tension in people's faces. You could see the fear in their faces. But if you smiled at them, most of them smiled at you back. And I think a lot of them kind of realized, well, this is kind of silly, but I kind of feel like I need to do this. So there you go. All right, so we are going to put this, we ended off, this is more scary stories to tell in the dark. And Ash, if you want to borrow books online because you're stuck inside, I hope it doesn't happen, but if you want to borrow books online, you guys can go to archive.org. Let me show you on the other camera here. Archive.org, where you can download these books for free for 14 days and up to 5 books at a time. And this is how I got this book. So if you're looking for a good read when you may or may not be quarantined or have to self-quarantine, which I hope never happens, then you know exactly what to do. Or if you just want to save some money and you just want to check out a book, they have millions and millions of different titles. They have some older movies and things like that on here, and you can log in for free. No cost whatsoever. This has been a public service announcement from Daddy Still Broadcasting. I am not sponsored by archive.org or their subsidiaries. I just want to let you know about this wonderful website so that you can access it too. So we left off, we're reading more scary stories to tell in the dark, the second tome in this 3-part series by Alvin Schwartz. And we left it off at she was spitting and yowling just like a cat. So the last section we read scary stories of situations that seemed real, like a woman who went to church in the morning only to find out that it was way too early and that there were basically ghosts and zombies and skeletons at the mass, at the service, and they wanted to kill her because she was there, but she escaped, thankfully. And so yeah, there you go. But just to let you guys know, this weekend, hopefully tomorrow, I'm almost done editing it. I will be putting out a new vlog tomorrow. Let's go to live chat. I will be putting out a new vlog tomorrow about this whole mess and the melee that ensued. I see 4 of you here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to watch Daddy Still Broadcasting formerly Daddy Daughter Broadcasting. So please, I see 2 likes out of 4. Can you get those likes up to 4 for me? It really does make a difference, and I would greatly appreciate it. No wine tonight, no whiskey, no wine. I mean, adult-rated grape juice or corn juice that perhaps was fermented in oak barrels at some point in time for taste, not for anything else. But tonight I'm just drinking water. Believe it or not, we've been really busy, and time just seemed to go by so fast today, doing other things and editing the vlog. I got a massage, which I love a good professional therapeutic massage, not the happy ending kind, guys, but the real massage, and the person who gave me the massage, just amazing, extremely relaxing. And whenever you get a massage, you need to drink a lot of water. But I also, I did that a little bit later in the day, so it seemed like the rest of the day just flew by. And by the time I was almost done editing the vlog, I realized, wow, I gotta go live and read these scary stories, because that's what I want to do. I know I don't have a schedule to follow here, no pressure at Daddy's Still Broadcasting, but I want to keep reading these stories with you guys. So we're gonna spend about an hour doing that. The tales in this chapter are about an empty trunk, a neighbor who turns into a cat, a strange drum, some very tasty sausages, and other scary things. Excuse me. So yeah, I will show you guys this artwork here. Let's show you. There you go. This scary bat, which was on the cover of the book. And we're going to start off with this. So this first story here, The Bride. This story is called The Bride. And this is the picture of the bride. I hope no brides anywhere in the world end up in that situation or looking like that. So yeah, The Bride. The minister's daughter had just gotten married. After the wedding ceremony, there was a great feast, with music and dancing and contests and games, even old children's games, like Pin the Tail on the Donkey. When they got to, I just added that part in. When they got to playing hide and seek, the bride decided to hide in her grandfather's trunk up in the attic. See, nowadays adults would kind of maybe cringe at the idea of playing hide and seek, but I think that's amazing that that they were doing that. Plus, I think back in the old days where this story kind of takes place, people got married a little bit earlier than I think they do now. So, when they got to playing hide and seek, the bride decided to hide in her grandfather's trunk up in the attic. "They'll never find me here," she thought. As she was climbing into the trunk, the lid came down and cracked her on the head, and she fell unconscious inside. The lid slammed shut and locked. No one will ever know how long she called for help, or how hard she struggled to free herself from that tomb. Everyone in the village searched for her, and they looked almost everywhere. But no one thought of looking in the trunk. After a week, her brand new bridegroom and all the others gave her up for lost. Years later, a maid went up into the attic looking for something she needed. "Maybe it's in this trunk," she thought. She opened it and screamed, "Ah!" There lay the missing bride in her wedding dress, but by then, she was only a skeleton. Can you believe that, guys? And that's another story that could have potentially happened, especially in the past. And this is the story of the next story, The Ring on Her Fingers. So as you can imagine, these stories are scary stories. Definitely not for the faint of heart, but they're not the most gruesome, scary stories because they're for children 9 years old and up. So yeah, I hope that never happens to anyone. I think it could still potentially happen these days, depending on the situation. I think it would be rare. I think it's highly unlikely, I don't see modern day people in this decade or in this century playing hide and seek at their wedding, but I think I find it very quaint and innocent that people at some point in time were doing that. Rings on her fingers. Daisy Clark had been in a coma for more than a month when the doctor said that she had finally died. She was buried on a cool summer day in a small cemetery about a mile from her home. May she always rest in peace, her husband said, but she didn't. Late that night, a grave robber with a shovel and a lantern began to dig her up. Since the ground was still soft, he quickly reached the coffin and got it open. His hunch was right. Daisy had been buried wearing two valuable rings, a wedding ring with a diamond in it, and a ring with a ruby that glowed as if it were alive. The thief got down on his knees and reached into the coffin to get the rings, but they were stuck fast on her fingers. So he decided that the only way to get them off was to cut her fingers off with a knife. But when he cut into the finger with the wedding ring, it began to bleed, and Daisy Clark began to stir. Suddenly she sat up. Terrified, the thief scrambled to his feet. He accidentally kicked over the lantern, and the light went out. He could hear Daisy climb out of her grave. As she moved past him in the dark, he stood there frozen with fear, clutching the knife in his hand. When Daisy saw him, she pulled her shroud around her and asked, "Who are you?" When the grave robber heard this corpse speak, he ran. Daisy shrugged her shoulders and walked on, and never once looked back. But in his fear and confusion, the thief fled in the wrong direction. He pitched headlong into her grave, fell on the knife, and stabbed himself. While Daisy walked home, the thief bled to death. So again, another story that could potentially really happen. So there you go. And the next story is the drum. Once there were two sisters. Dolores was 7 and Sandra was 5. They lived in a small house in the country with their mother and their baby brother, Arthur. Their father was a seaman and was away on a long voyage. One day, Dolores and Sandra were running across a field near their house when they met a gypsy girl playing a drum. Her family was camping in the field for a few days. As the girl played, a little mechanical man and woman came out of the drum and danced. That's pretty cool. Dolores and Sandra had never seen such a drum, and they begged the girl to give it to them. She looked at them and laughed. "I will give it to you," she said, "but only if you are really bad. Come back tomorrow and tell me how bad you were, and I will see." As soon as the two sisters got home, they started shouting, which was against the rules in their house. Then they wrote all over the walls with their crayons. S&M, don't do that. Just kidding. But don't write on the walls for real. Unless it's washable marker and we talk about it first. At supper, they spilled their food. And when it was time for bed, they wouldn't go. They did everything they could to upset their mother. They were really bad. Early the next morning, they hurried off to find the gypsy girl. "We were really bad yesterday," they told her, "so please, give us the drum." But when they told her that what they had done, the gypsy girl laughed. "Oh, you must be much worse than that, if I'm to give you this drum," she said. As soon as Dolores and Sandra got home, they pulled up all the flowers in the garden. They let the pig out and chased it away. They tore their clothes. They sloshed in the mud. They were a lot worse than the day before. "If you do not stop," their mother said, "I will go away and take Arthur with me," the little brother, "and you will get a new mother with a glass eye and a wooden tail." That scared Dolores and Sandra. "Hey, sweet Louisa, great to see you, sister." We're reading a story so far, just to give you a heads up, these two little girls went to see a gypsy woman who played this drum, this really fancy drum, and they really wanted it, But the gypsy lady told them if they have to go home and be really bad in order to get the drum. And they went home and were pretty bad the night before, like writing on the walls and ripping things up and not listening to their mommy when they say go to bed, just like S&M would never do. But now it's the second night and they've been really terrible. And their mother just threatened them. She will go away with their little brother and she will get a new mother with a glass eye and a wooden tail. So sweet Louisa, I hope you're doing great in spite of all this coronavirus madness. Let me know how things are in the comments here, how things are going down there in the beautiful, great state of Tennessee in Memphis, where you reside. That scared Dolores and Sandra, the thought of losing their mother. They loved their mother, and they loved Arthur. They could not imagine being without them, and they began to cry. I don't want to leave you. I don't want to leave you, their mother said, but unless you change your behavior, I will have to leave you. We'll be good, the girls promised. Yet they did not really believe that their mother would go away. She's just trying to scare us, Dolores said later. We'll get the drum tomorrow, said Sandra. Then we'll be good again. Early the next morning, they rushed off to find the gypsy girl. When they found her, she was playing the drum again, and the little man and woman were dancing in the drum. That's part of the drum. Whenever she plays the drum, that man and the woman dance around, kind of like one of those old cuckoo clocks. They told the gypsy girl how bad they had been the day before. That must be bad enough to get the drum, they said. Oh no, the gypsy girl said. You must be much worse than that. But we promised our mother to be good from now, said the girls. If you really want the drum, said the gypsy girl, you must be much worse. It's only for one day more, Dolores told Sandra. Then we'll have the drum. I hope you're right, Sandra said. As soon as they got home, they beat the dog with a stick. They broke the dishes. They tore their clothes to pieces. They spanked their baby brother, Arthur. Their mother began to cry. You're not keeping your promise, she said. We'll be good, said Dolores. We promise, said Sandra. I can't wait much longer, said their mother. Please try. Early the next morning, before their mother was awake, Dolores and Sandra ran to see the gypsy girl. They told her all about the bad things that they had done the day before. We were horrid, said Sandra. We were worse than ever before, said Dolores. Can we have the drum now, please? No, said the gypsy girl. I never meant to give it to you. It was just a game we were playing. I thought you knew that. Dolores and Sandra began to cry. They rushed home as quickly as they could, but their mother and Arthur were gone. They're out shopping, said Dolores. They'll be back soon. But they were still not back when the time for lunch came. Megan, great to see you. I haven't seen you in ages, Megan. I hope everything's going well where you live in the beautiful southern state. I forget which one, but I hope everything is going well where you are. And it's always great to see Megan Fox. So cheers, Megan. So the mother left, and they're telling themselves that they're not back, so the mother was not back in time for lunch. Dolores and Sandra felt lonely and scared. They wandered through the fields the rest of the day. Maybe they'll be back. They will be back home when we get back, said Dolores. And here's a picture of them, the little girls wandering in the woods looking for their mother. And you see this kind of creepy figure up here. This is Stephen Gammell's amazing artwork. And there you go. Actually kind of like demonic figures up in the woods there. So there you go. Yeah, so this is taking a time capsule back to my childhood, Megan. Yeah, the artwork from Stephen Gammell is amazing. And if you plan to buy these books, or actually just to let you know, Megan, too, I hope it never happens, but if you end up getting quarantined for whatever reason or something happens because of all this coronavirus mayhem, You can borrow these books for free and millions of other books at archive.org, archive.org, and that's how I got them. So instead of having to spend $20 to $40, that explains a lot. What do you mean? I'm quarantined? Essendon put me in a quarantine, in a preventative quarantine. All right. So there you go. So they wandered off. When they got home, they saw through the window that the lamps were lit, and there was a fire in the fireplace, but they did not see their mother and Arthur. Oh yeah, I wanted to say, if you do plan on buying these books, make sure it's the older versions with Stephen Gammell's artwork, because they made newer versions with artwork that's quite different from this, and it's just not the same as when I grew up and was reading these books as a child. So yeah, when they got home, they saw through the window that the lamps were lit, and there was a fire in the fireplace, but they did not see their mother and Arthur. Instead, there was their new mother, her glass eyes glistening, her wooden tail thumping on the floor. All right, so the next one is The Window, and here is some more of that artwork by Stephen Gammell. There you go. Amazing. I think it's the media he used is charcoal and ink and charcoal to make these amazing drawings. So The Window. Margaret and her brothers, Paul and David, shared a small house on top of a hill just outside the village. It was so warm one summer's night that Margaret could not sleep. She sat up in bed in the darkness of her room, watching the moon move across the sky. Suddenly, something caught her eye. She saw two small yellow-green lights moving through the woods near the graveyard at the bottom of the hill. They looked like the eyes of a small animal, but she could not make out what kind of creature it was. Soon the creature left the woods and moved up the hill toward the house. For a few minutes, Margaret lost sight of it. Then she saw it coming across the lawn toward her window. It looked something like a man, and yet it didn't. There you go, glowworms or lightning bugs. It looked something like a man, and yet it didn't. Margaret was terrified. She wanted to run from her room, but the door was next to her window. She was afraid the creature would see her and break in before she could escape. When the creature turned and moved in another direction, Margaret rushed to the door. But before she could open the door, it was back. Margaret found herself staring through the window at a shrunken face like that of a mummy. Its yellow-green eyes gleamed like a cat's eyes. She wanted to scream, but she was so frightened that she could not make a sound. Well, Megan, I don't know where you're getting your dates, but there you go. The creature broke the window glass, unlocked the window, and crawled inside. Margaret tried to flee, but the creature caught her. It twisted its long, bony fingers into her hair, pulled back her head, and sank its teeth into her throat. Margaret screamed, "Ah!" and fainted. When her brothers heard her piercing scream, they rushed into her room, but by the time they got the door unlocked, the creature had fled. Margaret lay on the floor, bleeding and unconscious. While Paul tried to stop the bleeding, David chased the creature down the hill toward the graveyard, but soon he lost sight of it. When Margaret recovered, her brothers wanted to move to a safer place where it would be harder to break in. But Margaret refused. The creature would never come back. She was sure of that. But just in case, Paul and David began to keep loaded pistols in their rooms. One night, months later, Margaret was awakened by a scratching sound at the window. When she opened her eyes, there was the same shrunken face staring at her. That night, her brothers heard her cries in time. They chased the creature down the hill, and David shot it in the leg. But the creature managed to scramble over the graveyard wall and disappear near an old burial vault. The next day, Margaret and her brothers watched as the sexton of the church opened the burial vault. Inside was a horrifying scene. Broken coffins, bones, and rotting flesh were scattered all over the floor. Only one coffin had not been disturbed. When the sexton opened it, there lay the creature with the shrunken face that had attacked Margaret. The telltale bullet was in its leg. They did the only thing they knew. They did the only thing they knew of to get rid of vampires. They did the only thing they knew to rid themselves of vampires. The sexton built a roaring blaze outside the vault and fed the shrunken body to the flames. They watched the body burn until nothing remained but ashes. And the next story is Wonderful Sausage, which is a story that could actually happen still to this day. I hope we never get to that point, but all of the talk of food shortages and things like that kind of makes me think of World War II. That's right, that's what we do to vampires, baby. So Sweet Louisa is still here, and we're always honored to have you, Sweet Louisa, and Megan Fox. Let's see, I want to go back to what Louisa said. Okay, so Sweet Louisa said, it's a lot of people buying a huge amount of bottled water, toilet paper, sanitizers, and bleach products. There you go. So a lot of, I know that you guys are very, very savvy, especially when it comes to, street smarts and just wisdom, homemaking wisdom. And what I mean by homemaking is even a man can be a homemaker and have that home economics type of skill. I'm a first aider, and I have my first aider card and things like that. But also, I'm very interested in survival. So with a bottle of bleach, you can make potable drinking water, and you can do a bunch of different things with bleach and clean your home surfaces. I would recommend, obviously, taking some darker clothing off, and I would actually maybe myself wear only my underwear so I don't bleach my clothes, because I don't have any fully white clothes while I'm cleaning the house with that bleach. But yeah, it's hopefully we don't get to that. And I think if you're referring to all of the crazy stuff that's going on, Megan saying it's really not true, I totally agree. I think people are exaggerating. Hopefully we don't get to that point, but I think it's good to have that skill and knowledge, because you never know. You never know. I think people are exaggerating and going way too far with this situation. Yeah, right? Well, since it's Daddy Still Broadcasting and no longer Daddy-Daughter Broadcasting for now, I could do that. And Megan, if you want to see something, I put out a couple of videos called Embracing the Cold, where I actually did get down in almost my underwear. I was at least half naked and got in the snow. I took a snow bath. I jumped in the snow from a balcony, and I made snow angels. So if you're even jokingly interested in seeing that, then there you go. Check that out. And yeah, I just want to, Sweet Louisa always leaves comments here. And I know, Megan, you're great. You always check us out, so we really appreciate that. Always taking time out of your busy lives to be here. So that said, the Wonderful Sausage. Well, awesome, Megan. All right. One dark, rainy Saturday afternoon, a fat and jolly butcher named Samuel Blunt had an argument over money with his wife, Eloise. Blunt lost his temper and killed Eloise. Then he ground her up into sausage meat and buried her bones under a big flat rock in the backyard. To keep the murder a secret, he told everyone she had moved away. Blunt mixed his new sausage meat with pork, then seasoned it with salt and pepper, added some sage and thyme and a bit of garlic, which would normally be a nice sausage recipe, but not in this case. To give it a special flavor, he smoked it in his smokehouse for a while. He called it Blunt's Special Sausage. There was such a demand for this new sausage that Blunt bought the best hogs he could find and started raising his own pork. He also kept a sharp lookout for humans who might make a tasty sausage meat. One day, a nice plump schoolteacher came into his shop. Blunt grabbed her and ground her up. Scary story burp, not sausage burp. Another time, Blunt's dentist came by. He was a little man, round man, and into the grinder he went. Then, one by one, the children in the neighborhood began to disappear, and so did their kittens and puppies. But no one ever dreamed that Blunt the Butcher had anything to do with it. Things went on that way for years. Then one day, Blunt made a big mistake. A fat boy came into the butcher's shop. Blunt grabbed him and started to drag him off into the sausage grinder, but the boy broke loose and ran out of the shop, and Blunt chased after him, waving a big butcher knife. When people saw this, they realized at once what had become of all the missing children and grown-ups and kittens and puppies. An angry crowd gathered at the butcher shop. No one knows for sure just what happened. No one knows for sure just what happened to Blunt that day. Some say he was fed to his hogs. Others say he was fed to a sausage grinder. But he was never seen again, and neither was his wonderful sausage meat. So, yeah, that's a story definitely not just based in fiction, definitely based in reality. Stories of people doing that, of cannibalism in Russia and just murders and people hurting people for food in World War II. Yeah, exactly, Luisa. Truer words were never spoken. Ew. Next story, the cat's paw. So here's the picture of the cat's paw. So again, that amazing artwork from Stephen Gamble. The cat's paw. Somebody was stealing the meat Jed Smith kept in his smokehouse. Every day a ham or some bacon, a lot of food-related stories today. Every day a ham or some bacon or something else was missing. Finally, Jed decided he had to put a stop to it. One night he hid in the smokehouse with his rifle and waited for the thief. He didn't have to wait long, for soon a black she-cat slunk in. She was the biggest cat Jed had ever seen. When she jumped up and pulled down a ham hanging from the ceiling, Jed grabbed his rifle and turned on the lights. But instead of running away, the cat jumped at him. He fired and shot off one of her paws. Jed was sure he heard a woman scream right after his gun went off. The cat began tearing around the room, spitting and yowling. Then she ran up the chimney and was gone. Jed stared at the cat's paw, only it wasn't a cat's paw anymore. A woman's foot lay wriggling on the floor, all shot up and bloody. So it's a witch that's been doing it, he told himself. Just then, one of Jed's neighbors, a fellow named Burdick, came racing down the road to get a doctor. His wife's foot had been shot in an accident. He told Jed, "She's bleeding pretty bad," he said. The doctor got to her barely in time. People who were there when it happened said she was spitting and yowling just like a cat. Very interesting. All right. So Megan, if you're here, how are things going where you are? It's basically pandemonium. And actually, let me take that back. In the supermarkets, it's pandemonium. I wouldn't even want to go to the emergency room right now because I'm sure it's crazy, amazingly crazy over there too. But today, I actually, I went to get a massage today, very relaxing massage. I went to buy some sandwiches for Mariska and I for lunch, and, I went to the pharmacy, did other things, a bunch of other things, and, people were out and about. There wasn't an air of panic, but I know that people in the supermarket are still going crazy. However, you can see the signs, just like Luisa was saying. There is no you cannot get rubbing alcohol in the city anywhere. You cannot get toilet paper is becoming more and more sparse. I will definitely give your hi and love and respect to sweet Mariska, sweet Luisa. So you can see the telltale signs of what's going on when you go looking for those things. But I got hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is not as good as rubbing alcohol. I read up on it. Rubbing alcohol can kill viruses and bacteria in less than 10 seconds. It's a longer time for hydrogen peroxide, but it's better than nothing. And I do have the bleach, like I was saying earlier, in addition to potable drinking water, which look that up on the internet. Don't just do it. You need to look it up on the internet if you're going to make it, because it needs to be a certain small quantity, and it needs to be in there for a certain amount of time, so that you're obviously not drinking bleach water, because the bleach actually does dissipate. The bleach transforms itself into something else after a couple days in the water, but in the meantime sterilizing it. All right, so I wanted to show you, before we move on to the next section of the book, this amazing artwork, Daddy Snort. Actually, no, just another story here. Ellen had just fallen asleep, the voice. Not the one on TV though, guys. You're not going to see Whoopi Goldberg here. Ellen had just fallen asleep when she heard a strange voice. Ellen, it whispered, I'm coming up the stairs. I am on the first step. Now I'm on the second step. Ellen got scared and she called her parents, but they didn't hear her and they didn't come. Then the voice whispered, Ellen, I'm on the top step. Now I'm in the hall. Now I'm outside your room. And then, I've got you! Ellen screamed, ah! And the voice stopped. Her father rushed into the room and turned on the light. Somebody's in here, she said. They looked and looked. Nobody was there. And there you go. That's the end of that story. So again, in the same vein of Stephen Gamble, just, some of these stories are really just made to give you the hoo-has, really just made to make you jump. So there you go. All right. So next section is, when I wake up, everything will be all right. There are scary stories here about a subway car, a shopping mall, and other dangerous places. So what I notice about the overall theme of this book, this particular tome, like the last time we heard a lot of stories about ghosts and goblins and things like that. Here we're seeing a lot more stories of things that could potentially happen in real life. We could, if we're half awake and we have one of those really scary lucid dreams where we where you get that sleep paralysis, that could potentially happen where we hear a voice or something scary happens or something like that. And but these things are possible, these stories in this tome. So that's what I'm noticing here, that there these stories in this particular tome, more scary stories to tell in the dark, are possible. They're possible. Ooh, this is a good one. This is a good one you need to see. There you go. All right. So when I wake up, everything will be all right. Oh, wait. I got to show you the full image of this because... All right. Let me get it centered here. Just amazing. There you go. So if you like scary stories and scary artwork, this is beautiful, beautiful artwork here by Stephen Gamble again. All right. Oh, Susanna. That's the name of the story, by the way. Susanna and Jane shared a small apartment near the university where they were students. So Louisa says, it's raining here, so tired of it. Plus the laundry center lights don't even work. Whenever I need to dry clothes that I wash inside my apartment unit. Yeah, that is rough. If there's no lights on, it would be. Are there windows there so you could at least do it during the day, or are you stuck? Yeah, drying in the apartment is not always fun. I totally hear you. We sometimes have to do that, especially in the wintertime. In the summer, we're lucky. We're able to string a clothesline out there, but our clothesline broke at the end of August, right? Actually in September, October, right before it got really cold, right before we couldn't dry stuff there. But I plan on stringing a new clothesline very soon, because now it's springtime and we're going to be able to do that much more often. But it is always a bummer drying clothes, because then you worry about the humidity, and especially in the wintertime it doesn't dry as fast. So I totally understand that. That's a scary story in and of itself. Okay, gotcha. So the lights still need to be fun. Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially a woman or anything like that. To even a man, if depending on how dark it really is in there, I wouldn't want to. I really wouldn't want to be there if the lights were not functional either. So that kind of stinks to have to go through that, because we all need clean clothes. That's for sure. Susanna and Jane shared a small apartment near the university where they were students. When Susanna got back from the library one night, the lights were out and Jane was asleep. Susanna undressed in the dark and quietly got into bed. She had almost fallen asleep when she heard someone humming the tune to the song, "Oh, Susanna, now don't you cry for me." Jane, she said, "Please stop humming. I want to get some sleep." Jane didn't answer, but the humming stopped, and Susanna fell asleep. She awakened early the next morning, too early, she decided, and she was trying to get back to sleep when she heard the humming again. "Oh, Susanna, now don't you cry for me." "Please, go back to sleep," she told Jane. "It's too early to get up." Jane didn't answer, but the humming continued. Susanna became angry. "Cut it out," she said. "It's not funny." When the humming still did not stop, she lost her temper. She jumped out of bed, pulled the covers off Jane, and screamed. Jane's head was gone. Somebody had cut off her head. "I'm having a nightmare," Susanna told herself. "When I wake up, everything will be all right." And that's the end of that story. Believe it or not, that story ends that way. And this next story is called The Man in the Middle. The Man in the Middle. It was almost midnight. Sally Truitt had just gotten on the subway train at 50th Street after visiting her mother. "Don't worry," Sally had told her. "The subway is safe. There's always a policeman on duty." But that night she didn't see one. Except for her, the subway car was empty. At 42nd Street, 3 tough-looking men got on. 2 of them were holding up the third, who looked drunk. His head rolled from side to side, and his legs refused to work. When they got him seated between them, his head came to rest on one of their shoulders. Kind of like Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's. You remember that? Is that the right name? Weekend at Bernie's? You remember that movie? I think there was a sequel too. Sally thought he was staring at her. She buried her head in a book, or in a laptop in modern days, and tried not to notice. At 28th Street, one of the men stood up. "Take it easy, Jim," he said to the man in the middle, and he got off. I mean, that's a different tone. "Take it easy, Jim." At 23rd Street, Jim's other friend stood up. "You'll be fine," he said, and got off. Now the only ones left in the car were Jim and Sally. Just then the train went around a sharp curve, and Jim pitched onto the floor at Sally's feet. When she looked down at him, she saw a trickle of blood on the side of his head, and just above it, a bullet hole. There you go. So, perfect stories to take our minds off of the coronavirus. The cat in a shopping bag is the next story. All right. Mrs. Briggs was driving to the shopping mall to do some last-minute Christmas shopping when she accidentally ran over a cat. Poor cat. She could not bear to leave the corpse on the road for other cars to hit and squash, so she stopped, wrapped the cat in some tissue paper she had with her, and put it in an old shopping bag in the back seat. She would bury it in the backyard when she got home. At the mall, she parked her car and began walking to one of the stores. She had taken only a few steps when, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a woman reach into the open window of her car and take the shopping bag with the dead cat. Then the woman quickly got into a car nearby and drove away. Mrs. Briggs ran to her car and followed the woman. She caught up with her at a diner down the road. She followed her inside and watched the woman slide into a booth and give a waitress her order. As the woman sat sipping her soda, she reached into Mrs. Briggs' shopping bag. Then she bent down and looked inside. A look of horror crossed her face, and she screamed and fainted. The waitress called an ambulance. Two attendants carried the woman away on a stretcher, but they left the shopping bag behind. Mrs. Briggs picked up the bag and ran. "This is hers," she called. "It's her Christmas present. She wouldn't want to lose it." So isn't that funny? The woman who had the cat in the bag, who took the bag from her car, and now she passed away. She's telling the police or the ambulance people that that's her Christmas present, but she's basically trying to give the dead cat back to her, from what I understand. I'm just taking a look at it. Then she bent down and looked inside. A look of horror crossed her face. She screamed and fainted. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Mrs. Briggs. All right, so there you go. I want to show you guys the picture of the shopping bag with, unfortunately, the dead kitty cat in there, and obviously that's not being shown. And then you got this amazing picture kind of this bed against the wall. The bed by the window. The bed by the window. The three old men shared a room at the nursing home. Their room had only one window, but for them it was the only link. To the real world. As it is, unfortunately, for a lot of people in nursing homes or elderly homes. Ted Conklin, who had been there the longest, had the bed next to the window. When Ted died, the man in the next bed, George Best, took his place. Excuse me, scary story, burp. And the third man, Richard Green, took George's bed. Despite his illness, George was a cheerful man who spent his days describing the sights he could see from his bed. Pretty girls, a policeman on horseback, a traffic jam, a pizza parlor, a fire station, and other scenes of life outside. My bed is by the window. Well, I hope you don't have nightmares tonight, sweet Louisa. Richard loved to listen to George, but the more George talked about life outside, the more George wanted to see it for himself. Yet he knew that only when George died would he have his chance. He wanted to look out the window so badly that one day he decided to kill George. "He's gonna die soon anyway," he told himself. "What difference does it make?" George had a bad heart. If he had an attack during the night and a nurse could not get to him right away, he had pills he could take. He kept them in a bottle on the top cabinet between his bed and Richard's. All Richard had to do was knock the bottle on the floor where George couldn't reach it. A few nights later, George died just as Richard had planned he would. And the next morning, Richard was moved to the bed by the window. Now he would see for himself all the things outside that George had described. After the nurses had left, Richard turned to the window and looked out, but all he could see was a blank brick wall. Karma's a bitch, ain't it, Richard? So there you go. So he decided to kill his friend just to be able to see outside the window, but it turns out his friend was either senile and was seeing things that were not there, or he was just trying to maybe uplift his own spirits and those of the people around him in order to and describing things that he was making up in his own mind just to feel a little bit better. Kind of like people, the reason why people tell scary stories to each other. I don't know if you saw that, but I just spit a little bit when I talked, so I apologize for that if you have seen it. If not, then I just gave myself away. But so yeah, so maybe he was just trying to uplift his spirits, and just like we tell scary stories to have fun and to scare each other in a safe way. He was maybe just trying to tell made-up stories of what he was seeing from the window, but it ended up being a brick wall. So he killed his friend to be able to look at a brick wall. Good for you, Rich. All right, next story, the dead man's hand. The students at the school for nurses got along quite well with one another, except for Alice. The trouble with Alice was that she was perfect. At least that's how the other At least that's how it's. Let me start this over. The students at the school for nurses got along quite well with one another, except for Alice. The trouble with Alice was that she was perfect. At least that's how it seemed to the other students. She was always friendly, always cheerful. Nothing ever upset her. Her school assignments were always on time and always perfect. She didn't even bite her fingernails. Many of the student nurses resented Alice. They would have to, as oftentimes that happens, for some reason, bad people or evil-minded people tend to hate beautiful and good people and tend to be jealous. And that is something inside of us that we should all try to uproot and get rid of as much as we can. We should love each other and be happy for each other's successes and be proud of and for those that succeed in the right way, of course. Many of the student nurses resented Alice. They would have liked to see her fail at something, become frightened or cry or do something that showed she had a weakness like they did. One night, several students tried to frighten Alice with a practical joke. They borrowed the hand of a corpse they had been studying in anatomy and tied it to the light cord in her closet. So the cord that turns the light on. When she tried to turn on the light, she would find herself holding a dead man's hand. That would scare anybody, one of them said. If it doesn't scare her, nothing will. After tying the hand in place, they went to the movies. When they got back, Alice was asleep. But when they didn't see her the next morning, they decided to find out what happened. There was no sign of Alice in her room, but they soon found her. She was sitting on the floor in her closet, staring at the dead man's hand and mumbling to herself. Alice didn't even look up. The joke had worked, but nobody was laughing. And here is the picture of the hand tied on the rope. There you go. The picture of the hand tied on the rope. To the light switch rope. The ghost in the mirror. This kind of reminds us of Bloody Mary and stories of the like. And this, I remember the story of Bloody Mary, especially when I was in elementary school, was very big. I never did it. I was always too scared to do it. But this is the image I will always had of Bloody Mary, or that type of thing in the mirror because of these books. And there you go, in the mirror. Scary face. Again, amazing artwork by Stephen Gammell. A ghost in the mirror. Actually, it's not even a story, go figure. It's just a game. This is a scary game that young people sometimes play, trying to conjure up a ghost in their bathroom mirror. Many don't really believe that a ghost is going to appear, but they try to raise one anyway for the fun and excitement. So again, I love the way Alvin Schwartz handles it, always putting in that reasonable doubt. Excuse me, non-coronavirus burp. Cough. That's a non-corona cough. Not corona cough. So please stay in the live stream because I do not have the coronavirus and I am okay right here with you. You cannot get the coronavirus through a live stream. Just letting you know. Ding. All right. So yeah, so I love that Alvin Schwartz puts that in there. Just to say, many don't really believe. Just to add that reasonable shadow of a doubt, and just to let people know, scary stories are for fun. That's it. Some are willing to settle for any ghost, but others have a particular ghost in mind. One of these is a ghost named Mary Worth, who is also known as Mary Jane and Bloody Mary. She is the heroine of an old comic strip, but some say she actually was a witch who was hanged at the infamous witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. Another of these ghosts is La Llorona, the weeping woman who wanders the streets of cities and towns from Texas to California and throughout Mexico, looking for her lost child. Still another is Mary of Wales, a young woman who is supposed to have been killed in a car accident in Indianapolis, Indiana, about 1965. Her ghost is one of the vanishing hitchhikers. It is said that again and again she thumbs a ride home for a passing car, then vanishes before she gets there. Here's how ghost hunters, or supposed ghost hunters, try to raise a ghost. In the most high-tech manner, they find a quiet bathroom, close the door, and turn the lights off. While they stare at their face in the mirror, they repeat the ghost's name, usually 47 times or 100 times. If any ghost will do, they say any ghost in the place of a name. If they do manage to raise one, its face will slowly replace their face in the mirror. Some say a ghost is likely to be angry at being disturbed. If it gets angry enough, they say, it will, and I love it, they say, it will try to shatter the mirror and come right into the room. But a player can always turn on the lights and send the ghost back to where it came from. And when that happens, the game is over. So there you go. Now back to real stories. That was just the explanation of a game, The Curse. My dad's friend, Charlie Potter, was a small, nervous man who was always looking around as if he was in some kind of danger. After he told me this story about his college fraternity, I understood why. The frat doesn't exist anymore, he said. It was banned years ago. We had just 9 members at that point, and were taking in 2 more, Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. One night in January, just about this time of year, the 9 of us took them out into the country for their initiation. We took them to an old deserted house where 2 young men about our age had been murdered recently. Their murderer was still at large. We gave Jack a lighted candle and told him to go up to the 3rd floor. Stay there for an hour, we told him, then come back down. Don't speak. Don't make any noise. If your candle goes out, carry on in the dark. From where we were standing, we could see the light from Jack's candle moving up the stairs to the 2nd floor, then to the 3rd. But when he got to the 3rd floor, his candle went out. We guessed that he had come to a drafty corner and the wind blew it out. But when the hour went by and he didn't come down, we weren't so sure. We waited another 15 minutes and got more and more nervous. So we sent Ernie Kramer up after him. When Ernie got to the 3rd floor, his candle went out. We waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but there was no sign of either of them. Come on down, we called, but they didn't answer. Finally, we decided to go and get them. Armed with flashlights, we started up the stairs. It was as quiet and dark as a grave in that house. When we got to the 2nd floor, we called out again, "Eyo!" But there was no answer. When we got to the 3rd floor, we walked into a great big open space like an attic. Jack and Ernie weren't there, but we saw footprints in the dust. These led to a room on the other side of the attic. That room was also empty, but there was fresh blood on the floor, and the window was wide open. It was about 25 feet to the ground, but there was no ladder or rope in sight that they could have used to get down. We searched the rest of the house and the land around the house and found nothing. We decided that they were playing a trick on us. We figured that in some way they had escaped through the window and were hiding in the woods. The blood on the floor was to throw us off the track. We guessed that they'd showed up the next day. We guessed that they'd show up the next day with a lot of stories and a lot of laughs, but they didn't. The next day, we told the Dean of Men what had happened, and he reported it to the police. The police didn't find anything either, and after several weeks, the search ended. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jack Lawton or Ernie Kramer. There isn't much more to tell, he said. Yeah. There isn't much more to tell, he said. We weren't arrested, but the college disbanded the fraternity and suspended the 9 of us from school for a year. The strangest part came after we graduated. Someone must have placed a curse on us. Every year since then, around the time of that initiation, one of us has died or gone crazy. I'm the only one left, he said, and I'm in pretty good health. But there are times when I just feel a little peculiar. Ah! And that is the end of that story. If I made you jump, let me know in the comments, please. All right. Let me see, how many pages do we have left of this book? Excuse me for the daddy snort. Let's see here. Page 67. Well, Sweet Louisa is back. She had to walk in the rain and get clothes from the laundry center dryer with your oldest daughter. Well, I'm glad you had your oldest daughter with you to keep you company, so I don't have to be telling any scary stories about Sweet Louisa from Memphis, Tennessee. Okay, so I'm going to try to finish this book, actually, because there's not that many pages left. I don't know if this is the full version. Some of the other versions, this is kind of an abbreviated version of this book, More Scary Stories. The other two volumes the other two versions of it are 132 pages, but for some reason they're not available for borrowing, and there's a wait list for this, so I don't know what's going on with those versions of the book. But yeah, since there's not that much left, we're just gonna finish it, and it's a good way to end a scary story book. It's called The Last Laugh. These stories are scary and funny. So let's see what we get ourselves into here. Another beautiful image of a church. And I love how it kind of seems like you can see underground, and it looks kind of like the ground is levitating. And again, just beautiful. It's amazing what you can do with some charcoal and pencil and ink. Yeah, absolutely amazing. All right, so the church. Oops, I just, okay. There was a fellow named Larry Berger in French. There was a fellow named Larry Berger who wasn't afraid of anybody alive, but anybody who was dead scared the wits out of him. One night, Larry was out driving in the country in his old Jeep when he got caught in a bad thunderstorm. The rain was coming down in sheets, just like at Louisa's house.